I lied. Again. I was going to focus on my other projects, but you guys seem to have liked the first part of the series, so I've been putting more work into my farming simulator. I first started by adding a drag and drop mechanic to my inventory UI, so I could move items to and from the toolbar. I made some sprites for dead trees and rocks, along with their animations. The pixel art needed for this game is extremely tedious to make, and I still have no clue how other people manage when making their own video games. After I made the sprites, I then added the tree breaking animations into the game. But there was a small issue where you could just spam the clicks even during the animations. So I needed to patch that up really quick.
I'll do it really soft. Come on, you know me. Hmm. Nice and soft. Ready? Stand a little bit closer.
I do want to make the game somewhat realistic, so I added an axe along with fixing another UI bug that had occurred. Following that idea, I also implemented a pickaxe and a hoe into the game. As I was testing out my game, I found that I could move the tools around the toolbar even when the inventory was closed, which turned out to be very annoying. So I made it that you could only move things around when your inventory was open. I also did some refactoring of the code and tidied it up. At this point, a lot of the code was also very redundant and needlessly required me to set the game objects inside of the inspector panel. So I added some automation to do it for me rather than me doing it manually. As I was doing this, I suddenly ran into this massive UI rendering issue where it just wouldn't display the slots properly. I spent a few hours trying to debug it before I realized I had just added one too many slots.
You will not lick me!
My current code only worked if the number of slots in the specific UI matched a set number, which in hindsight is pretty stupid.
Monday left me broken. Tuesday I was through with hoping.
The inventory management system needed to be changed a bit as well, so tools couldn't be stacked. I had also programmed a mechanism for the game to be able to tell what the player is currently holding in the toolbar. I had done that because I forgot to actually use the tool that I had already implemented in my game and make sure that the players can only mine or hoe with a specific tool. I gave the trees and rocks a health mechanism so they would be able to actually get destroyed. The trees were supposed to drop wood, but I kept on being too lazy to make art for this game, so I just skipped that part for now. Currently, I had a layer in the game where the items dropped in the world were supposed to be, but I completely forgot to use it, so I hooked it all together as well, and also finally made art for the wood. Remember the issue I said previously where you could just spam click the trees and rocks?
where you could just spam the clicks.
Turns out I forgot to fix that before, so I had to go over that again and actually fix it for real this time. When you tiled a plot of land, it would have spawned in these small isolated circles of dirt rather than connecting to each other. I had already made the artwork for all these different states, including the corners and so on, so I added a mechanism where they would automatically connect to each other. But I ran into multiple issues. I tried to debug, but for whatever reason, nothing was showing up in my console, and I thought I had actually broken everything in my game, and was pretty devastated. But turns out I had just disabled debug messages in my console, and they were just hidden from me. The reason the game hadn't been working properly was because when the code checked for any overlay on top of the dirt layer, such as grass or a tree or a fence post, I had accidentally changed it so that it would also check the dirt layer, meaning that the dirt was being considered as an overlay on top of itself, so it wouldn't allow any plowing to occur. All the directional pieces, like the corners and sides, were also somehow inverted. So I had to change them around so that it would actually make sense and look proper. The edges of the dirt tiles were also moving around for some reason, but it was just a sprite issue, so I had changed that in Photoshop. I then implemented the growth stages that I'd made previously into my game, and I also spent some time moving around the different sprite files to tidy up my projects a bit. But I wasted so much time just going in circles. I literally spent hours just moving the file from here, back to here, and back to here again. I also forgot to make an actual sprite for the carrot, so I just used a tomato. In my harvesting code, it was meant to spawn a set amount of carrots after they were harvested, but I didn't actually add a mechanism yet to get that data from the carrot object, and literally been calling functions that hadn't existed yet, and it threw a bunch of errors in my game, obviously. But at that point, it was pretty late, so I just closed it and saved it for another day. The next day, I quickly just fixed the incomplete code along with a few bugs that were occurring. I also connected together the code for planting and harvesting. But I ran into so many issues where it just wouldn't work. And even after I figured it out and it did work, the crops weren't even showing. But then again, those bugs were kinda my fault. I had forgotten to attach the crop data to the seeds, so when you use the seeds, the game couldn't even access that data. And I forgot to move the crop layer to a layer above the dirt, so the crops had been currently spawning below the dirt. That's why it hadn't been showing. Finally, at this point, my first basic crop system was finally implemented into my farming simulator, where the seed could grow and be harvested for a crop. I then made a sprite for all of the other crops as well, because at this point, I had only made a sprite for the tomato and wheat crop. And after I had done that, I changed the placeholder sprite that I had been currently using for the carrot into an actual carrot. Thank you for your service. Also, for whatever reason, when I played my game, my computer's fans would suddenly start blowing extremely hard, even though the game couldn't be any more basic at this point. Wow, this game is like so fun. Like, who's the handsome man that made this game? What is that? What is that? Is that the fan? Why is it so loud? Why is it going crazy? What is that? The crops were using a tick system to determine its growth. And on every stage crop refresh, it would have to make a brand new tile from the sprite, which I suspected were both causing a lot of work on the CPU. So I changed it so that the tile creation was more resource friendly, and I also converted to a day system to reduce the load I had put on the CPU cycles. I then painstakingly made more art for the other crop growth stages, which took a few days. After making all of the artwork, I implemented the crops along with their growth stages into the game. This part took absolutely so long. It was extremely tedious and repetitive, and I honestly just wanted to quit my project. At this point, I tested my game out again. And I'm not entirely sure what I changed, but for whatever reason, the crops just stopped growing and stayed as seeds. I messed around with the game clock code and finally got it working again, just after doing some reorganization. I also had a weird rendering issue of the taller crop sprites. As they grew longer, rather than just becoming taller, they got longer, but also moved downwards and maintained centered on the sprite. Whew, that's all done. I finally planted the seed. Okay, now time to wait. Oh, wow, look at that. It already grew a bit. Uh, What kind of growth is this? Why are you moving downwards? But this was just a quick fix of me moving the center all to the same location a bit lower. This might not seem like a lot of work right now, but this honestly took so much time and effort, and I'm pretty proud of the progress that I've made so far. I'm not entirely sure when this video is going to be uploaded, but I genuinely hope sometime soon. Currently, it is the 18th of October, so you'll know when this video is uploaded and you can just see how long it took me to edit this video. At the time of writing the script, I am around a week away from my IELTS exams because I'm also applying to unis, so it's a bit of work to juggle between them. The last video got quite a number of views, and I really do appreciate all the comments you guys left. I'll carry on pushing more progress on this game, so if you like my vid so far, do consider subscribing and liking and giving a comment of your thoughts so far. Hopefully, I will see you in about 3 weeks. Which turned out to be pretty annoying when I'm trying to select a tool or select a different tool to use it as I'm playing the game. Go here. Let's read the script. Plot of land. It would be separate. It would be isolated source of dirt. The reason the game wasn't working properly. I accidentally changed it so that it would. The reason the game wasn't. I'd accidentally changed it so that would, so that it would, so that it would, so that it would. The reason the game wasn't working properly. The reason the game hadn't been working. I had accident. What the hell? The reason the game hadn't been working. The reason the game hadn't been working properly early. Here. The reason the code around so that it would actually make. Let me just go from here, man. To tidy up my. I spent some time moving around the different. I also added the code for a planting and harvesting, and it just took a few small fixes and tweaks to fix it around. What the hell am I saying? So many fixes. I gotta slow down. But so when you use the seeds, and even once I figured it out. Thank you for your service, Mr. Tomato. What the hell am I saying? What the hell? And after I had finished making the carrot sprite as well, I changed the placeholder sprite. That's so many sprite. What else going on here? Where the fence is going? But somehow I preserved, and it was extremely tedious. But with some good luck, some luck, the crops were now not growing at all. What am I saying? Rather than maintained it centered on a maintained it centered. What does that mean? Okay. Dude, look at that. Let's go. And it does it dark. And make sure it looks fair. I don't quite understand cinematography, man. She just does whatever she thinks is right.
Buh.
Yes, true. Burr you.
Burr, bada bim.
Okay, ready? Yeah. So I'll go from the ground. Ready?
Yeah.
Recording?
Yeah, alright.
Of course this is okay. Okay. Maybe hold the edges, like hold the tip. So then go faster. Why is that? I can't handle this. Okay. Wait. Why is it so strong? Well, keep it recording. What if you shake it, like shake it, like see it, like. Why is it so strong? Okay, start recording.